come to China. Andy Tian, everybody. Put your hands together for Andy Tian. Come on now.
Hi guys, thanks.
That's a rock star. He and Robin starting a company and selling it to Zynga China. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a bit of luck. So
a bit of luck.
Don't believe story here.
The entire entrepreneurial game is a bit of a luckocracy, but you make your own luck. There's absolutely, you actually put yourself in the right position to make your own luck, and that's what you guys did. So tell us your story. You were born in China and then left early to go to the States, and then you've come back to the motherland and tell everybody your path.
Well, that's the story, right? Richard, you told it very, very well. Richard's really good at summarizing things, so he's an awesome host. This way, guys like us don't have to speak. So, but surely, so I was born in China. I was born in Chengdu, actually. And when I was 10, I moved to New York. Went to high school in Brooklyn. Those of you from New York knows how that builds a man into a man. Grew up in Brooklyn. So, and then went to school in Boston, and then worked in the Valley, 98 to 2000. So in the craziest times in the Valley. That was when you can basically name your price if you're an engineer anywhere, and you can just raise money like there's no tomorrow. Oh, like it's now. So, so back in 2000. I was joining a little startup back in the Valley making software on Netscape. Actually, if you ever remember what Netscape was. And in 2000, January, I came to China. So from San Francisco, I landed in Beijing the middle of January. So the moment I landed, I want to go back. I was like, damn, it's cold here. And I was walking on the street, I almost slipped on someone's frozen spit. So that was my first night in Beijing. I was like, this is awesome. I love it. But since in China, I came to China to start an internet company with some of my friends. It was called QZone back in 2000. It was a friend, you can form friends and friends-to-friends circles around bands and singers that you like. You create content for them, and you form groups around music that you like. And you can connect with friends, post messages, so on and so forth. So if it sounds familiar, it's probably very familiar. So, but it was just a couple of years ahead of its time. And after a little while, I went to BCG to learn how to make PowerPoints and learn how to dress in a suit. And unfortunately, from BCG, I went to Google, which then had no need of suit anymore. So all my suits are gathering dust and probably not usable anymore. Very sad. So don't do that. So at Google, 05 to 07, I led the mobile business in Google. So one of the big things, one of the funniest things, the most interesting thing at Google I did was, I think at the end of 05, I was on Google campus. This like random nerdy old guy came up to me and said, hey, I heard you're doing mobile in China. I think you guys would like this thing. Handed me this little plasticky kind of kids phone type of things. I played around with it, and then a browser came up, and then some UI came up. I was like, oh, this kind of looks interesting. But then, of course, it immediately crashed. And he said, oh, sorry, I had to restart that. And I was like, what is this? He said, oh, this will change the world. I'm like, okay, tell me again what it is. He said, it's a new mobile operating system. I'm like, what is it called? It's called Android. I'm like, what a dumb name. Why would you tell anything Android? I know. He's like, yeah, I mean, I love Star Trek. So he said, don't worry, it's just my internal name, we'll change it. Of course, he never did. So that was Andy Rubin.
Name stayed the change, and it still crashes.
It still crashes, exactly. That's a feature, to remind you it's built by real people, right? No one's perfect. No one's perfect. So one thing I did was I brought Android to China, to China Mobile, to the OEMs and ODMs. So one of the things I pushed back really heavily on Andy was that I told him, you should not open Android. I was like, Android is, if you make it free, internet-enabled, easy to develop for developers, that's good enough. You should not make it open. We had a number of fights over this thing. Of course, he was bigger than me into ranking. So he said, no, I negotiated a deal with the China Mobile to have all the royalties that have like Google's App Store, locked and not able to be removed from all Android phones in China, had those deal terms ready, and says, no, we'll open it for everybody. So there you go.
I think Steve Jobs, it was actually part Chinese because he knows how to negotiate.
Right. So yeah, so it was really fun. It's really funny to see how industry are shaped by one man, one decision for one purpose, which is just be idealistic.
Steve Jobs or Andy Rubin. Yes.
Yeah, or Andy Rubin for that matter. So it's I mean you can't argue with that. So history will take its path.
So good ride, and then Google, kind of the golden era of China. You did a big deal with China Mobile, and then.
Then just went to start my. I mean, I'm a startup guy, so I will always build companies, and in middle of 2008, started a gaming company with my buddy Robin because we thought that, Chinese play a lot of games online, and Americans don't play a lot of games online. Maybe they should. So, and a lot of friends were doing things on Facebook, and they were making good money with really bad games. So we're like, oh, we can make really bad games too, and maybe we'll make money. And we did. Amazingly enough, people were paying for like the most random, most crappy stuff on Facebook back in 2008. And it was great. It was awesome. The golden era. So, and then we started making money and started to do more. And we knew Zynga from 2008 days. So, ending 2010, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. See, the industry is consolidating. The fast and the Zynga is going up in a rocket, become very hard for small developers. So Zynga gave us an offer, say, do you want to build the biggest company in China? I'm like, okay, sure, that sounds nice. So we joined Zynga and became Zynga China in 2010.
Congrats. And how long has it been since the acquisition now?
Actually 2 years. It's about exactly 2 years.
So share with us some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities from being, attached to Mothership, and kind of navigating both the Mothership satellite and also the China Silicon Valley sort of transition.
You live on a plane a lot, so I got to 1K really fast on United, and unfortunately nowadays, 1K on United does not give you anything besides just kind of a close encounter with people's grandmas as stewardesses. But other than that, it's actually great because Zynga is a very new company. I think most international companies, when it comes to China, they suffer from baggage of their success and of their history outside. Every company who came to China, internet company, probably have about 10 years of success or something or other in the States, and it really shaped how they would think about China. But Zynga is very new. We started in China when Zynga was only 3 years old. So there was no expectations for China. Just like, you tell us. We don't even know what we're doing over here in the States. You tell us what we should do in China and how should we tackle it. So that was great. And then the company itself is also growing, and so my management in Mothership essentially were too busy to kind of try to manage me over here, instead of just like, so it's me asking them for support and so on and so forth, but the guidance of how we build a company here is actually mostly we can drive it. So that was very different from Google, where down to the letterhead that you use, the printouts in China was a global standard. So I think that was the most interesting thing there, and because of that, I think that the approach for international companies here in China has to be taking everybody always says, yes, you need to invest before you reap revenue here, which is very true. But the other thing that you should always start with your strength. What are your strengths as an international company in China? And it's never your brand. Your brand isn't worth crap here because most people can't even spell English. So how would you do that, right? How do your strength as an international company mostly is your product and your technology. But you have another problem. When you come to China, you had to hire people, right? They're all new. They don't know what you have made overseas. They don't know your processes, your technology, your method, and tools. So you take the time to train your team over here so that they truly can produce products that are not only Zynga standard, but also fit for the market. I think that's the investment that you should do.
So I'd like to ask you about the market in a second, but yeah, tell me about how the whole sort of development process, how that was that. I would guess that was probably the biggest change. You know, using the quote unquote Zynga method, the playbook that we've heard of. How much did that change your approach to gaming? Is it pretty strict or by the book, so to speak?
Games are just damn hard to make. I mean, 90% of games just fail in general. So like, I also say that games are craft, right? Games is like making a very delicate, fine pottery. The thing, there's a tens and 20s sets of steps you go through to make a game or make a pottery. Any step, any failure in any step, or any imperfection in any step, the whole thing breaks apart. So it's a very fragile business, and it just and ultimately it's not like a travel search or e-commerce or email where most users have similar needs. Right, you can define standards like cheap, fast, reliable, quality. For games, everyone has a different set of criteria on why it's good for them. And for one game, you may not even like it, or your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend may love it. So how do you create a product where the end user requirements are always changing and really different? That's really hard. So if you can make something that you like, but users hate it. So, and if you make something that's not big enough for the right audience, it's gonna fail. So that's probably one of the biggest thing about why games is hard. Well, Zynga makes games that's a little different. That we have a lot of data. We can analyze data, analyze metrics to really test out: is this bridge over here or over there? Which one drives user engagement more? We can test that in our games. So therefore, we can use metrics and creativity to create a better experience for most people.
So I'll talk to you about the market in a second, but just a sort of game question that's I think might be interesting for people to hear. So for social games, there's a lot of fluidity compared to say like a console game or a PC game where you might need like 1 year or 2 years to kind of launch it, and that's pretty much the game until maybe there's a new version a few years later. With a social game, you're launching it, but then you're constantly making tweaks. What percentage of the gameplay is sort of set in stone, or how much of it is the effort in actually post-launch, you know, making things fresh?
Great question. I think so. For example, one of our longest running is Farmville. I think it's been around for like almost 4 years. So probably 99% of the game is made after launch by now. So the hard work starts after launch, because certain games need to be constantly expanded and constantly maintained in order for engagement to stay. I mean, that's actually, same thing as a girlfriend, right? You have to constantly maintain your girlfriend, talk to them, make them happy. If you leave them alone for like a couple of days, a couple of weeks, that's fine. But for a month, they'll probably go find someone else.
That goes back to the whole fragile pottery metaphor.
Fragile.
Exactly, yes. So in terms of the market, initially you were focusing on the developing games in China for the China market. Is that continued, or are you sort of an engine for the back end of Zynga for the rest of the world and also launching games in China, or are you really just kind of a self-contained unit for this market?
What's interesting that if you see games in China right now, it's evolving to be less and less to have a hard border. So a lot of Chinese games, a lot of international games are popular here in China too, and more so. For example, Plants vs Zombies. That's not made for China, but everybody in China plays it, right? If you like our Cityville game in China, where you transplant from the States to China, people say, it's gonna suck because it's not localized. Well, people love it because these are games that people are universal. Like movies, right? Are any movies made in China? Well, maybe Transformers had a Shuhua milk, but that was it, right? But people love entertainment because they're made right and they make great entertainment. I think that's where our position here in China is to make great games for global market, including China. And because if we make them in China, we can deploy them and operate them overseas, as well as in the local Chinese market, with some modifications, obviously. That's our goal. We're a very simple company. We make games, and people play them, and hopefully we make some money.
Interesting. So you're using China as this engine for gameplay, global launch, no hard border, as you nicely said. When that harder work kicks in post-launch, is that still managed? Like, would you be managing or
separately.
Like Europe, or they have like their own team that sort of takes over the maintenance and optimization?
Right. That's a good question. So when you develop a game, the same game can be used for global market. But once you post-launch, operations and iterative expansion, of course you need different teams for different markets. One for the Western international market, and one for the local market. But then that can be the same combined team. You can actually leverage a lot of content and services that actually build for different markets.
Interesting. So last question is, I know that when you were acquired, you were more PC focused, doing some stuff on mobile. Zynga made that big acquisition of OMG Pop with Draw Something. It seems that mobile is becoming increasingly more necessary for social games. Where's the future of social gaming? And, I know mobile's a big part of it. What are some of the other things you see down the track?
I think that what's going to be interesting is sort of cross-platform. So people want to play games everywhere, right? Like in front of computers, with their phones, while they sleep on the bed, well, probably in the bathroom. And then more of you play games in your bathroom than you want to admit. I'm sure that's the case. So we want to satisfy all those urges everywhere you are, whatever you do. So I think that, but the different platforms like PC, tablet, and mobile phone have different form factors and different technology. But they all user want a seamless experience. And I think that's one of the things you see in the future, that one game experience, you can play games 24 hours a day. That is our dream, and it's good for users too, I promise you. That's one vision. Another one is also, of course, social games becomes not just for casual players, but also for the more bigger and heavier games too. So the line between what's social, what's MMO, what's web-based game will become increasingly blurred.
Really interesting. That's great. Excellent. How about some juice? Warm round of applause for Andy Tian.